Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby, and I'm really excited today because we are going to be talking to men and also to women who want to understand men better, but to men about why men need each other in life in general, but specifically when they're going through a trauma like divorce or some kind of difficulty in their lives. And my guest today is Quentin Williams, and Quentin is a mental performance coach and facilitator for men and athletes. His mission is helping high performers build confidence and embody healthy masculinity by training in the often misunderstood science of emotional intelligence. He's trained over 1,000 business leaders and pro Olympic and collegiate athletes, helping them clarify and activate their unique purpose and build confidence that transcends their title and uniform. Quentin has partnered with the likes of Yale Football, Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Concussion Legacy Foundation. As the founder and head coach of World Class, Quentin's work frames a unique intersection of emotional intelligence, healthy masculinity, and athlete identity. Quentin was a Gator Bowl champion at Northwestern University and holds a master's degree in sports administration. So what a perfect person to have here today. Welcome to the podcast, Quentin. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, Rachel, it's really exciting to be here. I appreciate the time and the topic, especially today.
Yeah, and I love this topic. So let's get into it. First of all, I think it's important to talk about the historical and cultural influences on masculinity, particularly the emphasis on the man up culture and self-reliance in lieu of asking for or seeking for help when somebody is feeling down or going through something difficult. So how did this affect men or boys when they were younger becoming men and men today?
Yeah, well, I mean, the man up formula or the man up system, I guess, I don't know if you know the statistic, but I think 3.5 times more likely men are to commit suicide than women are.
Wow.
And, you know, I don't want to blame our culture for that. I don't want to blame, I don't like to sit in the seat of like the victim of all of this. Right? And I like to focus a lot on what we can do about it, which I know a lot of our conversation will be focused on.
Right.
However, you know, a history lesson is definitely necessary here, mm-hmm. right? And how did we get here? And the man up sort of stigma in our culture is something I grew up with. I know my father grew up with. I know his father grew up with. And that was sort of part of just an era. You know, it's coming out of like, you know, the post-war kind of mm-hmm. culture. And, you know, a lot of emotion was from a stoicism perspective. There wasn't a time for it. There wasn't like a space for it for a good reason, because, you know, we needed to go to war as men. We were the ones that went to war and had to compartmentalize in many ways. Unfortunately, a lot of men came back from war, came back from those times, and were trying to reintegrate into society, into culture. And it was like, you know, a lot of those men didn't have the tools, or they experienced a lot of trauma overseas, right? And didn't know how to process what they were seeing. And where I work at now is at the intersection of really transitioning from whether it's military service, whether it's sports experience, that sort of arguably traumatic experience, you know, being an athlete, being caught in the military industrial complex in many ways, right? As someone in the military, transitioning into the real world, right? There are many tools that support us in battle that don't serve us in the real world. And compartmentalization is one of those things. When it comes to, it only works until it doesn't work. You know, we can compartmentalize our emotions and man up. And I don't want to condemn that, because I actually think it's a useful tool that we as men need to have, right? Someone needs to have that if we're going to fight wars, if we're going to protect our boundaries, if we're going to assert ourselves in ways that are meaningful, right? However, I think, we did have a culture and probably a longer than a decade just went a little too far with that.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's helpful actually to go a step further back. Before industrialization came around, before we developed everything we have now, we were much more of a tribal culture, in which historically the men would actually ancestrally go out for hunts in the mornings together. And on those hunts, you weren't just hunting down an animal. There was a lot of downtime. There's a lot of time to actually connect, to be a part of the pack, to really dive into what's going on for you, whether you're a young boy or an old man, and learn from one another. I would say that packs and those hunts were really the first instances of what you flash forward to now as men's groups and men's work. And it was all focused around like what guys got to go and do. And, throughout time, we've, our culture has experienced a lot of trauma in different ways. And as men, we aren't as well equipped with the tools for how to navigate that in a useful way. So we are kind of seeing a resurgence of this, redefinition of what man up means. And in a way, we're actually kind of going back in time to simpler times where men actually connected, men actually had those tools, not nearly as well as women do or ever will, right? However, we do have that tool. We do have that muscle, and it's something that's actually going to really serve us in this next decade.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, something you pointed out about kind of the old times when the men would go out and in groups. And that's, I don't know, I'm sure you've read King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which I recommend that book to all men and women because it really helps understand the perspective. But the whole premise of that book was that there was this rite of initiation for boys from the elders, right? And we so rarely see that anymore in society. I mean, at least not here in North America. But and it's sad because I think that was such a big part of initiating men into boys into becoming men. And so I love that the work you're doing and others like you is really bringing that back. I mean, the men's group is bringing, like you said, it's bringing back that whole concept of of feeling comfortable around other men and sharing and letting them all help each other, but also learning from the elders. So, yeah.
It's a bit of a lost art. So we're really trying to bring that back. And redefine what manning up means. In many ways, I'm really encouraged by this younger generation because you're right, there is a trend towards this. And a lot of older men can easily kind of judge the younger generation, but they can also just as easily learn a lot from the generation. And we can learn a lot from the older guys as well. There's everything's not toxic at that generation. I want to be clear about that.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
So much strength that those men have. And so we can learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we've kind of already touched base on this, but let's talk a little bit about how the teachings are changing now compared to, how men used to be taught or what they used to learn from their elders or fathers, grandfather figures, and just focusing on today. What do men need to know about redefining masculine strength, open communication, and developing that emotional intelligence in order to manage their emotions and be able to communicate with their partners and others?
Yeah. So all those outcomes you just listed, being able to communicate more effectively and deeply with your partners, with others, with your coworkers, with even your boss, and like really move a point forward, even in a business meeting. Stories sell. Stories work. And no one can, we trust people when we know their story. That's why I always lead with authenticity. It's not a sales strategy. It's a nice bonus that when I lead with authenticity, people can actually relate to what I'm going through. But as men, a lot of us have a guard up or a wall around our story. And true leadership, my definition of leadership, I'm borrowing from my friend Ryan Carnahan, who runs a really awesome dads and men's community. His definition of leadership is being like your comfortability with your imperfections. Yeah. And we can't be outwardly authentic, open, vulnerable. A man will never go there and build trust if he's not okay and comfortable with his insecurities, with his vulnerabilities. So when we look for all these external outcomes, a better relationship, better sex, like better connection with your kids, being more present, those are all external outcomes of an internal battle. And that's where it really starts. And so when a man starts to look himself in the mirror in a way that he's not shaming himself, he's not trying to call himself out or trying to belittle himself, he's trying to look at himself and say, who am I? Mm-hmm. What am I feeling? What are the emotions that I've been feeling all this time that maybe I just haven't given a voice to? I've barely even written down, nobody knows these parts of me.
Yeah.
And the reason no one knows it is because I barely know it. I'm barely even willing to look at it because it's scary, Yeah. And so this whole idea of like emotional intelligence for men, it's a huge barrier. It feels like this big mountain that we have to conquer. Even though subconsciously it's actually more of an anthill, right?
Yeah.
Like once we take a step over it, we realize, man, that wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was, And that's the
fear is what holds people back always.
And it builds up over years and years and years. Yeah. That's why so many of the older men have trouble with this topic because they've been doing this for 50, 60, 70 years a certain way. Yeah. Now, us as young men, we have a bit of more of a privilege. We can kind of be more agile here. And we can, that mountain, it isn't as big, but mind you, still, it's just a mental mountain. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to redefine what manning up means or what masculinity really means, it always comes back to our internal mountain, how we're viewing ourselves and how we're orienting towards our emotions. And so I'm not a very popular coach because I talk about emotions, men's emotions, right? And a lot of guys don't like that topic, like just the fact that I have that in my Instagram bio. A lot of guys might just turn the volume down or just, swipe away. But I catch a lot of guys' attention as well. And it's because they know that there's something there for them. They've heard about EQ as like the new IQ. And they're like, man, there's things in my life that I'm not reaching my potential. So if I want these external things, how do I get them?
Yeah.
Most of us men think that it's going to be to man up more, which is to work harder, to strive more, to set bigger goals, to be more disciplined, to wake up at 4 a.m., to get in the cold plunge. All those things, cool. But if there's not internal work being done on what I would say the feminine side of our body, of our mind, of our soul, if there's nothing behind it, no one can feel you, no one can trust you, no one knows your story. You barely know your story. So I challenge a lot of men, obviously, to get into those habits, right? To get back on the horse in many ways on that masculine side of the coin.
Yeah.
But it's not true integration if we're only bringing one side of the game, if we're only playing offense and not defense, So my methodology of man up actually encapsulates stepping up and opening up. That's how we integrate what it means to truly man up, step up and open up vulnerably to yourself and to others.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, I love that you do this work. And I think, when I went through my divorce, I learned a lot. I mean, I spent 2 years just really focusing on myself. And I said, I'm not going to date until I'm at the point where I know exactly who I am now as this new individual, the me, no more the we, and what I want, what I need. And I did that. And it was interesting to me just kind of to point out that I thought, because I went through this wonderful spiritual awakening, I had this most amazing vibration and energy, and I was so ready to go out there and go dating. And I had friends who had been doing it for a while after divorce, and they said, oh my gosh, Rachel, the men are just not emotionally intelligent. You're just not going to find anybody. And I said, yes, I am. What are you talking about? You can't make this blanket statement.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like when I went from high school to college, and and then to law school, like each time I always thought, oh, now the men are going to be more mature now, and I think it's because I was such an academic and I had that masculine drive, and I had that, like, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a judge. I mean, it was just this very defined path, and it scared a lot of guys back then, boys. I mean, I call them, they were young men. Yeah. And I didn't find those. I did find a few, but it was very hard.
So when I got out of my marriage, it was kind of that same thing. I thought, oh, I'm in my 50s now. These guys are going to know. They're going to be, they've, like me, they've gone through long marriages, most of them raised families. They've learned a lot. And I only date men who have children because I think that adds a whole different component to the men. And I thought this will be easy, right? And so I started going on all these dates. I didn't want a relationship. I just wanted to go out there and have fun, and ended up meeting somebody, and been in a relationship now for 2.5 years, but most emotionally intelligent man I've ever known in my life. And it's just been such a blessing because it has allowed me to embody my feminine energy. I feel like it's taken this weight off my shoulders that I didn't even know was there, really. So
it's a really interesting point. It sounds like you're referring to kind of this gap in which, women tend to be more emotionally mature than men are, just on average. We kind of we score lower in emotional awareness and recognition and expression than women do. I sort of found this myself. Like I kind of always felt like I was a little more emotionally mature, or at least more sensitive. But does that really make me more emotionally intelligent? Right. So I think that's a really interesting caveat. I think most people hear emotional intelligence and they think that I mean to be just in touch with your emotions. Right.
Right.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because if we're only in our feminine in that case, and we're just tapped into our emotions, and we don't know how to navigate them, respond to them, instead of react to them, then how much more intelligent are we really? So what we're really talking about is, what we're really talking about is like, it's actually almost a branch of Stoicism. Stoicism gets a bad rap because people think it means stoic. It's actually a total misnomer. Stoicism is about being really in touch with our emotions. Marcus Aurelius is infamous for being poetic in his language and meditations, right? And so, there's a serious artistry and heart to everything that he put out on paper, right? And he also had that warrior in him at the same time. He could compartmentalize when it was time to go to war, and then he could come home and be the lamb, so to speak, while also being the lion. And that is, interestingly, that's something that all of us, I think, as men and women these days, we embody more. It's almost like the standard has become for all women to be able to be, in their masculine, pursue the law degree, to pursue, being a lawyer, pursue everything that you have in lioness form, and also be able to surrender into your feminine. Right. You have both qualities to you. And really the standard that men are up to these days is to be the same, to be able to be dynamic enough and integrated enough to be able to flex each muscle. Yeah. There's a great book that Jason Wilson wrote. He's incredible author and teacher on masculinity, especially for young men. It's a book called The Man the Moment Demands. And that's exactly the principle I'm really referring to. There's a different man that's demanded of the modern day man when he's at work, when he's at war, when he is with his kids, when he's with his wife, when he's courting somebody, when he's leading a family. Right. And there's a different woman that the world demands, or the family demands, or the business demands, the podcast demands. And that's really, I think that's really what we're all striving for now. I'm not saying everyone. There's a lot of kind of more traditional roles these days as well playing, but you kind of have to choose where you want to fall on that spectrum in a way, right? And that's how we find polarity. It's how we find balance. But the majority of women I talk to say this very similar things that you mentioned, which is that I was in my masculine and I couldn't be in my feminine because I didn't feel like I was with a man who could lead me. What I hear there is that for whatever reason, whether it was his fault or my fault or just the dynamics,
it's the relationship.
Culture. You could say culture's fault, whatever you want to say there, right? But like the dynamic wasn't working, and it was because Rachel felt I had the lead, and he was not leading the way that I wanted him to, and I felt afraid. I didn't feel safe, and the feminine within you deeply wants to feel safe. wants to feel led.
Yeah. Let me piggyback on that. I'd love to get your opinion. So what about right now, well, not just right now, but I'd say in the last decade or so, how we've seen all of these pushes to boys. For example, when they're on a soccer team and they lose, let's give them all trophies. Do you think that, what is that doing? I mean, I feel in my perspective and my man's perspective is like, you have to win and lose. That's how you learn about life. Yeah. And if you get a trophy for losing, what is that teaching you? So do you think that that is going to have an effect on some of those boys as they grow older?
Yeah, undoubtedly.
It's the opposite end of the spectrum, right?
What's the point of a trophy?
Exactly. You didn't win, and it's okay that you didn't win. You can't always win. Not everyone wins every time.
Yeah, it's a false sense of reality.
Yeah.
It's like we would be living in communism. We would be living in a highly socialist, society.
Yeah.
And our society, just like, if you're going to live here, if you're going to be in America, if you're going to live here, like, you're going to want to operate by our rules, which is, it is more of a survival of the fittest economy that we live in. And you can judge that. You can say it's good or bad, but we're not serving our kids if we're raising them to live in that kind of society when they don't live in it. Like, that's not reality. When they get into the business world, into the corporate space, you don't get participation trophies for performing terribly at work. You get fired.
Yeah, and those participation trophies that you get when you're 5 or 7 or 10 because you lost a game, I feel that, how are you going to be a solutions man? How are you going to figure out, if you lose as you get older, you might just get angry and be like, oh, I should have won, instead of like, okay, let me think about this for next time. How can I do better? What can I make, how can I improve this? And I'm sure you haven't seen those men yet, because to me, it feels, well, my son is 28 and they started doing that probably not too far after he went through all this, elementary sports. But I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see in future. And I think there's a lot of parents that don't like that too, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if you have new coaching clients that are now less in touch with themselves and don't understand why they can't be successful.
It's true. I mean, the mental health crisis is pretty scary amongst young. The stats keep getting worse as you go younger, as it relates to suicide rates and depression rates and lack of friendships and social media addictions. It just keeps getting worse as you get younger. However, at the same rate, because there's so much desperation there's also a lot of people reaching out and asking for help.
Yeah.
They're under so much pressure that there's also this kind of cream rising to the top that's asking for help. And I know some 25-year-olds that are some of the most emotionally intelligent people I've ever met. And so I'm also very inspired by that generation. But you're absolutely right. Much of that generation has been formed by the participation trophy culture. And it's really sad, right? And I don't work with a ton of those individuals, but I know I will. Yeah,
I was going to say it might be coming.
They'll be coming.
That'll be interesting. Let's talk about. So I know there have been a lot of studies that have indicated that men and women have very different types of coping mechanisms and adaptability skills, and you've alluded to that already. And I often see this with men who are coming out of divorce, and I see a lot of men who literally get divorced and they're like on this spring mat and bam, they're off dating and having sex, like with everything they see, right? So an example. Okay. So my question is, what types of coping skills are important to embrace in order to heal so that men can build their new life after this loss, after divorce, and feel like they are whole again and do, I hate to say the right thing, but the right thing for themselves so they can go out there and find joy.
Yeah. Well, I know you're not saying this in the way you are, but I do think the word coping is probably not the right word to use, because really coping is not healing. Coping is doing anything but healing, typically, right? And so when I think of coping, I think what men tend to use is exactly what you said. It's it's sex, it's working more, it's achieving more,
Yeah.
it's substances.
It's kind of putting like a blanket over
Yeah.
what you need to be focusing on to doing the healing work.
Men know that subconsciously. We all do.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to reach for the beer or the girl or the dating app and just kind of numb it out. I mean, guys do it in this more subconscious ways too, whether it's just working or working out or working on themselves. That can become an addiction as well, because it's actually sometimes working on yourself is rooted in the fact that I think I'm broken and I think I need fixing. When like all of those things are coping mechanisms of the ego. And so that's an important distinction, that our ego is constantly trying to keep us busy, constantly trying to keep us small, keep us disconnected. So it's going to run to meaningless sex. It's going to run to meaningless work, unfulfilling work. It's going to run to substances that only give us short-term gratification and dopamine. And so the ego just wants to keep us in that box and keep us small. And your authentic self wants to heal. It does. And it's hurting, and that's, obviously we come back to like the first step of all this is like looking yourself in the mirror, like we started this conversation, and being willing to sit with yourself. I've gone through 2 breakups in the last 3 years. One was a 5-year relationship. One more recent was a 2-year relationship. And, I'm not perfect, but one of the best things I've done has been to be very, very intentional with myself and sit with myself around the emotions that have been coming up. And it's not fun work. You don't want to do it because it takes a lot of time.
You're right.
It wastes a lot of time. It's very annoying. I'm actually only 2.5 months out of my most recent one. And so it's kind of fresh. And there's been moments where I don't want to sit down and be with I want to get to work. I got stuff to do.
Right.
But I know myself well enough now that all of those things can wait. As much as they seem like they're so pressing, and I got to pay the bill, or I got to get the client, or I got to get the workout in. Sometimes the best workout or the best, effort in my job is actually to sit in that chair, put on some music, and like actually feel the deeper stuff that's going on. And process it, let it move through me. I can't tell you how rewarding that is. After 30 minutes of it, whatever it is, however long it takes, you feel like a completely different person. You're not often completely healed after just one session like that, but you start to peel back layers. You start to kind of, empty the cup out of grief. 'Cause that's really what it is. It's inside you. And if you don't empty it, it's just going to stay there. It's not going anywhere. You're going to have to deal with it eventually, or it will come out in the wrong ways and the wrong people on maybe your ideal relationship in the future. So
100%. You are so right. And that's the beauty of doing that hard work, even though it sounds so daunting. And sometimes it's just the thought of like, oh, I have to do all these, 20, 30 things, and I have to do a deep dive into myself, and I have to figure all these things out, and I have to maybe do some shadow work, and I have to figure out, there's so much, and each person's different. Each person's different. But I always tell my clients there will come a point, I promise you, if you do the work, and I will help you, learn how to spend your time. So you're not like, oh, which one do I have to work on now? Right. And if you do the work as you do it, like you said, and sometimes it's as easy as just sitting there and meditating, or just sitting there and turning on the music and feeling, eventually, you start to feel a little bit better. And the more you do, the better you feel. And people always ask, well, how will I know when I'm ready to start dating? And I say, you'll know. Believe me, you'll know. You'll be able to write down, what do I want in a partner? What do I need in a partner? And, so it's a wonderful thing. And I just think it's incredible that you're doing that and teaching men how to do that, because a lot of people, women too, they just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. So I think it's really hard to get over something like that, a divorce or a long-term relationship, on your own. If you don't, I just was speaking with someone yesterday in another podcast about this, and she said, I don't believe it's possible at all to do it on your own. So anyway, but why don't we I would love your take on some examples of modern supportive environments for men, and how do men go about finding these, like these, men's groups and other things? Because so many men, I mean, do you look online? Where do you go? How do you figure out the right space for you?
Yeah, it's great. Great question. So one thing that I want to highlight is, we as men, we don't like hearing theories. We don't even like listening to podcasts unless we actually trust the guy who's talking, or like we actually know their story. Just like what I was talking about earlier. Yeah. If I don't know your story, why am I going to trust you? You don't have any credibility with me. If you're not Andrew Huberman, like, Stanford, neuroscientist, I'm not going to listen to you. Right. Mm-hmm. That's just how we are as guys. And so the same goes when it comes to, where we learn about masculinity. If there's a man who's talking about these principles or what men should be doing or how we should be operating without actually doing their best to authentically embody it and do it and be that example, then we're not doing men any service. Like, mm-hmm. I believe my biggest service as a coach, as a leader is to truly do my best to do the work constantly. So I always have a coach. I always have someone in my corner who's feeding me feedback, giving me tools, giving me new recipes for my ego, and how to heal. And because there's always more healing to do. So
never ends. Never ends.
Call that out. Like, we're still living life. There's still going to be trials and tribulations, and so healing continues. Those old wounds will pop back up, and so. That's a constant. And so without having someone in your corner, you're absolutely right that we can't truly heal as effectively as we can alone. So that's huge. And I want to, acknowledge your husband as a great example as well. Like, we need more men to be outspoken, to be in the spotlight on podcasts that represent those qualities, right? Because a lot of men we aren't surrounded by, or we're not hearing from, or we can't trust the models that we're seeing, mm-hmm. online and music and industry on TV. And so much of this comes down to like, who can you trust, and who's actually embodying it. So shout out to Mr. Rogers. He's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, literally went to my church growing up where I'm from. And what I loved about Mr. Rogers was he was the first king of emotional intelligence, and he embodied it. Yeah. He literally lived it. He didn't teach what to do. He showed you what to do. He actually
You're right. I never thought that.
Shout out to Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. He was a good man.
Yeah, he was awesome. But I guess to answer your question more directly, where would you find places like that you can actually, get those tools or resources, mm-hmm. or just to become a more emotionally intelligent man? That's where I would start, is look at the men around you. Look at the men that you see that you actually want the life that they're living, mm-hmm. or at least the majority of it, components of it. Look around to them and ask them, where'd you develop your emotional intelligence? Most of them I will probably tell you, either in a church group, through the Bible. It was maybe through a mentor. It was through working out and like having a disciplined practice around that. There will be all kinds of wisdom you'll get from someone who's actually embodying it, because there's no hacks. There's no quick fixes to becoming more emotionally intelligent. It's surrounding yourself with the right kinds of people. So the more you can get in their corner, the more you can get, in their ear and learn from them, the more you will be forced to grow. You'll be forced to rise up. So that's what I would say first of all is like, tap your current network, look around and see the men that are currently around you. Are you inspired by them? It's time to find a different room. It's time to say goodbye to some. And that's usually the most uncomfortable second step of this mm-hmm. process. Once you identify, like, I'm not feeling what I want to feel. Okay, well, I want to feel this. So are the guys around me feeling this? Are they talking about these things? That's a hard pill to swallow for many men. And it might require moving. It might require cutting people off from conversations. It might require setting boundaries around certain topics.
Yep.
That was a lot of my first couple of years of my spiritual journey and development as a man. But, and then I would say the third step is, okay, how can you surround yourself with those kinds of men? How can you be the originator or creator of that environment. There's a great concept called the mastermind principle. If you want to raise your level of consciousness and your emotional intelligence, start a men's group. Put out the bat call and say, hey guys, like, you're 5 guys that I want to emulate, that I look up to, not to put you on a pedestal, but like, I want to get us together consistently to have conversations. I did that for years. I started one of my dream men's groups, and it lasted for 2 years. And was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. Wow. Now I lead those groups. I create those containers for men so they don't have to do the hard work of like doing the searching, doing the Googling, doing the tracking guys down, the scheduling, the facilitation, like what do we talk about? What are the rules for this? You know, like all that stuff I've done for the last 6-7 years. So I can kind of fast track and save guys a lot of time and energy. But it's not rocket science at the same time. It really just takes practice, and it takes the right guys that are bought in. So I would say, aside from just finding a good man or two in your life that you want to emulate, it's finding a good men's group, a good group of men that are all up to really cool things that you could learn from. Yeah. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love that. You've provided so much great information for men who are out there and maybe going through a difficult situation and not understanding how to heal. And I really do embrace this whole new way to help men, and kind of bringing back, like you said, that old school. I mean, it's part of my, I guess, Cherokee and Apache heritage, where, you know, the Native Americans sat around the fire pit, and the men showed the boys how to be men. And so I love that idea. So thank you. And this has been such great information, and thank you for sharing. And for those who want to get in touch with Quentin, you go by Q, right?
Yeah,
with Q. Yeah. I'm going, for those who are watching, I will put the links up on in just a moment for you to connect with him. And for those who are listening, they will be in the show notes. So please reach out. And if you need some help in finding a men's group, or have any questions, or a coach, please let him know. Also, if you like this content that you heard today, or any of the other episodes you've seen, please like, comment, share. I do this out of the kindness of my heart. It's not a paid position. I do this to help you, and I love finding amazing guests like you to come on the show. So please let me know that you appreciate that. And thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. This was an awesome conversation. There's one more thing. If folks find me on Instagram, if they want just a free kind of 101 kind of emotional intelligence 101 starter pack, there's a simple training I have on my website. If you either DM me on Instagram the word emotions, I'll send it right to you, or you can go to my website and just punch in q-williams.com/emotions. It'll take you right to the training and give you kind of a high level, a deep dive of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I have that on the links too, so that'll all be up for everyone to look at. And thank you so much, Q. I really loved having you here today. It was a fabulous conversation. Very enlightening.
Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.